Welcome to the third episode of Connected Through Cinema. Today we have Poroma, whom we better know as Cinema Wali, with us, whose content has inspired us, be it through her video on mannerisms of Irfan, her Coke Studio video, or her video on Amis, and so many more, of course. Poroma, thank you for joining us today. The first question I want to ask you, before we delve into the topic of our discussion, is how did Poroma become Cinema Wali?
So actually, back in 2018, I had a job which I still have. I'm still at the same office, which is at MX Player, the streaming platform. While I was in the industry, technically, I felt like I wasn't getting as much of a creative outlet as much as I wanted. So I realized that there's a lot I want to say about films that nobody else, not a lot of people are saying about Indian cinema online. So I decided that this is something I can do. And I love editing. And for a long time, I have always wanted to make a short film, if not a feature film or whatever, in the near future. But I have always struggled with finding people to get things done. So I thought, this is one thing that I can do on my own. So that's what I started doing, and now we are here.
That's nice.
You do really make things which most of the people do not, and you inspire us a lot as well.
Thank you so much, all.
Yeah, you're specifically even not your larger videos, even your smaller videos, specifically your edits. I really enjoyed your edit on Voxan, like the term which you used. I don't know, am I saying it right?
Yeah, I don't know honestly how it's pronounced, so I've only read it so far, so I'm not going to say it.
But yeah, I think your content is extraordinary. I think very few YouTubers make content like you do, and I really hope that more and more people notice you around, because I think people are missing out really.
Thank you so much, Shubhadeep.
So today we are going to discuss one of the most popular web series in the world and probably a little underrated in India. We're talking about Fleabag. Fleabag is a British tragicomic television series created and written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It was initially based on her 10-minute one-woman stage show, which was first performed in 2013. Phoebe won the Best British Academy Television Award for the female comedy performance for the series. The second series of us, the Part 2, received 11 Primetime Emmy nominations. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge earning Outstanding Comedy Series, Outstanding Lead Actress, Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series. The series also received the Golden Globe Award for Best Television Series and Best Actor for Waller-Bridge. So the series is currently available on Amazon Prime India. If you have not watched it, go ahead and watch it first, because there are going to be spoilers. And I'm certain there are certain aspects of Fleabag which you haven't seen in other web series. And go ahead, do that, watch that, the two series, 12 episodes. Come back, watch this podcast, and subscribe to our channel. All right. Now, since the monologue is over, let me start this conversation by talking about the standout aspect for Fleabag for you, Poroma. What do you feel is the standout aspect on a personal level for you?
On a personal level, the standout aspect was that it finally felt like my story. This is something that a lot of people who know me closely have told me, that you remind me of Fleabag. Or when I watched the first season, it was a little disturbing for me, because it was very, it was attacking me personally. It was showing me things that the destructive behavior that I was encountering in my own life, and it was in front of me, and I was like, why are you showing me what is wrong with me? So I didn't like it, and everyone told me, why do you not like it? I thought this is your show, this is about you. But then I watched the second season, and then when I went back to the first season about 2 years later, I actually liked it, because I had come past my issues. So it's been such a journey with this show, and the second season is even closer to my heart, because I'm a die-hard romantic at the end of the day. So that's all I can say about this.
Okay, awesome. What about you, Arup? What is standout for you?
I like this aspect of Fleabag attacking all the, within quote isms. So many things in the series, and it goes on hitting them as well as getting imbibed to them. It might be feminism, it might be religion, it might be atheism as well. So when I started watching it, I was really loving it. Like, this protagonist seems to be an atheist, and I could relate to her. Later, I found it's also like, it's attacking the same atheism itself. So anything institutionalized gets attacked. And any ism within institutional, agenda or checklist is only cynicism. And Fleabag takes that out, brings that aspect out, that essence out very nicely. And that itself is the paradox that we live in, right? So be life, sex, love, whatever it is, it's all about paradoxes. And that paradox is very, very much available in the essence of Fleabag.
It will hit as a personal story, irrespective of whether you are a male or a female. I do not think it is in those boundaries. Probably you have a different backstory, but again, the vulnerability is so genuine, I feel. Also, I really enjoy the fourth wall breaking aspect of it. Like, you are part of that secret group with Fleabag, and like it's your story too, because there are things which you know about Fleabag which others don't. So I think fourth wall breaking is quite common in theaters, and in cinema also we have seen, but such efficient use of fourth wall breaking, I think I have found in Fleabag, which really helps me to relate to it as a content.
Definitely true. I also want to say that I totally agree with Arup about what he said about the isms and questioning the isms. There's this scene in the first episode, which is one of my favorites, when they have Claire and Fleabag have gone to this feminism
Yes.
seminar talk, something that's happening, and the person on stage asks, how many of you here would give up something
5 years of your life
to get the perfect body, 5 years
yeah.
Yes.
And these two raise their hands, and then later everyone is
They
watching
look-
them, and later they ask each other, are we bad feminists? It's such a great point to make, because this is how I feel all the time. Also, you guys also feel this. As men, it might be even more difficult questioning yourself every day, trying to be an ally. It's like I am so conscious of my body, but I also want to look good. But does that make me a bad feminist? So what do these isms stand for? It's such a great question.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, yeah.
Very true.
Absolutely. I think also some way it tells us like not any of the isms are to be taken like so seriously. At the end of the day, you got to be you. And isms do not define people, because we are different people at different times. Sometimes we might be feminist, sometimes we might be religious, sometimes we might be atheist. So a single ism does not define us as persons. So I think that is one aspect again, which is really interesting about Fleabag.
Definitely.
While we talk about that, again, one of the aspects which I want to bring, which is happening more and more now, at least in the world level, and to an extent in the India also, the woman writing about women thing. Mostly, the most popular of them, my favorite, of course, is Greta Gerwig. Like she wrote Frances Ha, Little Woman, Mistress America, Lady Bird, and we have seen a very nuanced way of seeing the things away from the male gaze. Like for us, for whatever we have seen, women and even representation of sexuality or any other thing, adolescence, flirting, most of it has been through the male gaze. Most of it have been through male writers and male directors. So it is refreshingly different from what we are seeing in Fleabag and also in so many others. So do you find a difference in that? How do you perceive it, this woman writing about women revolution?
Absolutely, there's a difference, especially if you compare it with Indian content. For example, if we look at a film like Pink, which is an issue film, okay, it's trying to, oh, the woman is not the villain. I, a man, will explain it to you. No, the women are helpless and they have not done anything wrong. Okay, fine, but here in a show like Fleabag, you have an extremely flawed woman, you have an extremely damaged woman. There is no right or wrong, and it's all her perspective. So it's something that's entirely missing, I feel, in Indian content, except for something like an Alankrita Srivastava's work. Even though I feel like it's missing a lot, but she's done quite a good job of it also. But the fact is that when you're writing about women, nobody's asking you to write them as goddesses or as mothers to be loved and cherished, and you don't have to write them as perfect beings. You have to write them as human beings. And writing women as human beings is extremely difficult for someone who doesn't have compassion and doesn't understand, who's actually not interested in the lives of women. So it can be a man, even someone like an Abhishek Chaubey, one of my favorite portrayals of a woman's gaze. This is something I'd also said at one of another podcast, that Abhishek Chaubey is someone who portrays the woman's gaze so beautifully. In Ishqiya, there's this scene in the song Dil To Bacha Hai Ji, where Naseeruddin Shah is in a bus and a young woman is looking at him. And it's such a refreshing scene to me because, you know, this is not something that happens a lot even in real life, but it looks so genuine, like this could happen. And it's an extraordinary moment to me. So this is something I appreciate in his work. So while women need to write about women and their voices are relevant, even men can write well about women, you know, if they actually just care about women. So yeah, what do you guys think?
That's true. That's true. You rightly mentioned. For me, actually, the first 2-3 episodes, I was a bit unsettled because I have not seen like that before. I have seen sitcoms, but it was like, say, for a friends, as I would see from a male's point of view, I was seeing the very similar thing from a female point of view, and I was like, it's looking great, but I do not know why I am feeling a bit unsettled. And then I realized because I have not experienced something like that, in the past. And by the time I end season 1, I felt so comfortable. It actually reminded a lot me about a Woody Allen film where there is this person who is not sure of himself, paradoxes, vulnerabilities, defending and countering himself at the same point of time. And I'm a big fan of Woody, and I got the similar experience from that. And talking about, woman writing about woman, yes, you are very correct. It seems like they paint the woman in a 2D kind of a thing. It will be either a person without any blemish, would be this kind of, at a high pedestal, and then that kind of a representation we see. Of course, exceptions, as you told. Another one that comes to my mind is Sir. I'm not sure if you have watched that, by Rohena
Not yet.
Gera.
Not yet.
That's a beautiful film. Again, I felt the very similar thing from that movie. But yes, woman writing about woman is different, and that difference I got to know from Fleabag more than anywhere else.
What about Shubhadeep?
So yeah, I think I echo what you and Arup talked about. So I know we have both have watched Queen's Gambit, and I think you made a post about you enjoyed it. I also enjoyed it to a great extent. But then there were certain moments in Queen's Gambit too when she is emotionally down and when she is depressed, she still looks super good, right? And her legs are shaven and she's like in the room and sitting. So I think those aspects of this is one of the aspects of men writing about women where they get certain things wrong. Because now, how did this come to me? Because I have seen enough good work of women writing about women. Because now I have another perspective of looking at those things. So now if I see something like that, I get to understand that okay, it's a great series, but a few places you are not actually getting it right, and it is extremely refreshing actually that those things are coming out. If we talk about women directors, I think this Death in a Gunj by Konkona. So again, like it is not really about this feminism, but overall, if we talk about it, it's very refreshing. It's very different from what we are used to see. So yeah, I think it gives me a reason to look forward to. But again, there is something like 4 more shots also exists, which is wrong at so many levels. I mean
True.
But you know what? Talking about FOMO shots and what you said about Queen's Gambit, a lot of women also watch FOMO shots because a lot of women aspire to this, you know, because they want to be seen in that way. What you said about Queen's Gambit, I just realized you are right. But when I saw those scenes, it didn't occur to me, because when I'm watching it, I'm like, even I want to look like this when I am sad and drunk, you know, even I want to be, like constantly in a Lolita zone. But it's aspirational, but it's also problematic, like you said, because nobody looks like that all the time. So, and women are always under pressure to look like that. And I personally face that. So you're right, and I don't see that in Fleabag. I don't see her trying to be sexy ever, but I still perceive her as sexy, which is amazing.
Right. Yes. Yes. Talking about sexy, let's talk about the hot priest.
Yes.
So, I don't know whether you, of course, you have noticed that the priest also, just like Fleabag, doesn't have a name, and we'll come to that. The priest also doesn't have a name. He's just the hot priest. And when he comes to her life, things change dramatically. Like, he is the first person who is able to break her defense and listen to what she is saying to her secret accomplices, and that basically shatters her. So one of the most interesting scenes which we have to talk about is that confession in that booth, where when he asks her to kneel, and it is a very weird scene, because then there is a sexual tension around, right? And still at the same time you feel so much for Fleabag, because there's a rant, and that rant talks about that I want to be told to wear this in the morning. I want somebody to take care of me, and all those aspects of it. So that is one of the things which I really enjoy. What is your take on the priest scene, actually? On the
So,
priest
you know what? For a while, I have wanted to do a video on the second season about these aspects, but I am still wondering if anyone wants to watch it.
We want to watch it. Yes, yes, we want to watch it.
Definitely want to watch it.
Thanks, guys. It's just that a lot of non-Indian content on my channel doesn't get as much watch time as the others, but that's okay. Let's see if that happens. So, about the confession specifically, you'll remember that in the show before that scene, she has been to a therapist once.
Yes.
And the therapist asks her, do you want to fuck the priest or do you want to fuck God? So I think this is the theme of the whole season, where love and God have been brought together. And while so she's an atheist, she knows that. And that's also parallel with the fact that she does not want to fall in love. Somewhere she has probably lost the belief, the faith that she maybe someday had for love, because she's been so detached from people for a long time. So she doesn't want to get vulnerable. So when God is challenging her, love is also challenging her at the same time. So, and that both those things come together in the form of the hot priest, these two higher powers, God and love. So when she makes that confession, she's making that confession in front of God, but she's also opening up to someone she loves. So it's like she's having to break down completely. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. That opening up, I felt it's so amazing, because we have seen so many sequences where, a person is falling in love with the other, and then sharing his or her vulnerabilities, opening up in many different ways. There has been so many emotional sequences and scenes in our cinema. But here what we see is something that the point you were mentioning, that Fleabag finds out the audience as her accomplice, and no one else notices that. The priest notices that, and it seems like, that one secret she had, which was her coping mechanism against the loneliness, this person comes in her life and gets that from her. So it's kind of the love, the emotion is also breaking the fourth wall. And I do not remember having seen an expression of love portrayed so beautifully in a long time. It's so unique and innovative in doing that. And coming to that scene, in the scene that you mentioned, the confession scene, again, as I was saying, she is an atheist, but the priest gets her into the confession room and asks her to kneel. So that's what you do in love. You kind of conflict yourself to the worst possible or the best possible, as you put it, when you are in love. And those are sequences so subtly put in this series that those are things which stands out, makes the difference between any series and Fleabag.
Right.
Definitely.
That's very, very interestingly put, actually.
Mhm.
Moving on to one of the most debated aspects of Fleabag. Why is it called Fleabag? Why doesn't Fleabag have a name? Everybody has a theory on it. So I would like to hear. Okay, let me start with Arup on this one, and then I'll get to Paroma. Arup, what is your theory?
And we want your perspective also. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
We all call her Fleabag, but yes, there is no character calling her Fleabag, so that kind of maybe raising the question. What I felt is it's more of a common noun than a proper noun. Any female, or for that matter male, who is going through this kind of a scenario, cosmetic relationships only, sex but not bond, is what we are meaning as Fleabag, and she stands for them. That is what my interpretation would be. Paroma?
I think, I genuinely never actually gave it a thought, because I just thought that sometimes in a narrative you want to rise above the character itself, because you know how we talk about either she's so relatable or she's so shocking to some people, right? Depends on who's watching. But she's not just a person, she's a concept that people relate to and they can put themselves in her shoes. So somewhere I feel that's why maybe they didn't give her a name. I genuinely haven't thought about it, but now that you ask, I think that might be it. And also the word Fleabag, like fleas are those little insects, I guess, that so I think it's just about her being a human being full of issues, just like anyone else. And that's just it. That's all she is in the show. For the most part, she's just that, and she's trying to overcome the fact that she's going to remain that because she's human, but she's going to still be happy and live on.
Yes. I would like to add to what Arup has said and also what you have said. So basically, Fleabag is a common noun. A representation could be. She's like a representation of a certain group of urban people who have had several cosmetic connections with the world, but nothing deep-seated. And this happens more and more in the modern world, where people are lonely and vulnerable. We have so many friends, but how many friends do we have at the end of the day? So I think it is a representation of these people who are living in this world, having corporate jobs and doing something on their own. Now, their problems might be different, but at the core, they have their issues. They are sad, and the beauty of it is that it is a gender neutral term. A male could be a Fleabag, a female could be a Fleabag.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. That the whole no gender aspect of it. But since we are on the topic of names, I also want to bring up the fact that Claire is one person who has a name, and in the second season, the person she ends up with is also called Claire.
Yes.
I think that was really interesting because in the first season, she has a lot of self-confidence issues, and she's anorexic, and she's always comparing herself to her sister, even though she has a great job, but she wants to be cool like her sister. And in the second season, she falls in love with someone with the same name as her. To me, it feels like she's finally accepted herself. Claire se mujhe pyar hua hai finally.
Yeah. She finds a resonance. She finds a resonance, maybe. Finally, she finds someone resonating with her, and obviously the names are same.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, Paroma. That's a very nice perspective.
Yes, we expect this to be in the video article which you make, Claire.
Let's see. I don't know if it's happening. Let's see.
One of the standout aspects of Fleabag is what makes Fleabag is the humor, and it is loud at sometimes. It is very subtle at other times. So talk us through your most humorous moments. I will also talk you through them. So what are the things which you found funny in season 1 and season 2, if you could tell?
My favorite season 1 moment is the last episode when they go to the godmother's house. I don't know what they go for. I don't remember season 1 so clearly. Claire and Fleabag are sitting with her, and they obviously have this awkward tension between them, right? Godmother is again one of my favorite characters, and she's wearing a scarf kind of thing on her head.
Yes.
And Fleabag says, "That's a nice hat you have on." She says, "It's a headscarf." And Fleabag is like, "Looks like a hat." She's like, "Well, it's a headscarf." It just blew my mind how they did that. It was so funny. And it's nothing. It's nothing, but it's so much.
Yeah.
That's one moment. What about you guys?
Oh, I can talk so many. Okay, let me start with the scene of the dinner, the season 2 first scene, which steals the thunder. There is this
best episode.
Yeah, the father wants to give a speech that they are all there, and all he says is very much. I hear this very much, and that's it. That's the speech, and everyone claps. So the person, it feels like he wants to say very much. He wants this to end somehow. That was amazing for me, that the person is so under the influence of the godmother that he himself does not want to even speak openly. Other than that, of course, the hair is everything scene. Who can forget that legendary hair is everything?
So true.
Yeah, you weigh in on that. Yeah, I think the hair is everything. You should weigh in because
look at me. I can't see. I think I'm very annoying when every time I'm not used to leaving my hair open. Okay, and every time I'm streaming, recording, doing anything, I'm just like, I keep doing that because it's just I can see it on the screen and it's bothering me. And if a hair moves from its place, it looks bad. I cannot take it. It makes me fidgety. I feel like that is such a true what that scene is all about. It's so true. That's why sometimes you want to cut it all off, and women have such a complicated relationship with their hair. That's why the fact that they addressed it's incredible. I thought it was really funny.
Right.
I thought every scene with Olivia Colman. So, like, if there's one thing, I have not seen the stage play, but what I feel is if there's one thing which makes the series different or stand out from the stage play would be the stage play do not have Olivia Colman. She was amazing. That passive aggressiveness in wherever she is countering that these two girls. It's amazing. Specifically, I remember this scene, that sequence you spoke about when they have gone to their place. And when they're coming out, finally, they kind of put away their masks. Fleabag pushes Olivia and she slaps her. And immediately they're back to being, those facades of them are back. They're like, again, having the pleasantries exchanged. And they're back to what they have always been. But there was this one moment, maybe seconds of it, where they have lost their mask and they were fighting. They were literally fighting. That was hilarious for me.
I think Godmother has a lot of those moments. In the second season, when towards the end, the second last of the episode, I think, when the hot priest comes in and tells them that I can't conduct your conduct your wedding,
yes.
And Godmother is like, "It's all right. Oh, you have to go in again. Tika jao jao." And then she closes the door, and you can't even see her. She's outside the frame, and you hear, "What? I can't." It's so funny, and you just see Fleabag and Claire standing there like,
and then she shouts that I do not want them around.
Yeah,
she wants them
throw
to
them
leave.
out. I want to be alone. I need to paint. It's just brilliant.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And I also, that point you mentioned, Paroma, like, here is everything. And that is the beauty I was talking about. So, see, there are feminist, content which would give this idea about, it's not about the body, it's not about the looks, it's about, some out of the world thing that is not relatable to common people. And those are things also which Fleabag breaks. So there was this wave of feminism which was against porn and all. And then there was another wave maybe against heterosexualism. Fleabag kind of counters both and gives a more relatable shape to feminism, which we do not often see.
I think, yeah, you're right. I understand where you're coming from. That the fact that feminism, this is something I encounter every single day online, is that you can't be morally ambiguous. You have to be right all the time.
Right.
which is not possible for any human being in the world. So, for example, if you're celebrating that Kamala Harris finally, after hundreds of years, the US has a woman VP, not even president, VP. You are like, thank God, chalo, acha hua. No, usme bhi people are going to say that no, a lot of people are celebrating it because she's a Tambram and they have their caste pride, etc. attached to it, which is true. But then you as a person who just genuinely cares about the woman aspect and woman of color aspect, or maybe don't know about the crimes she has committed, etc., you feel like you are in the wrong, even though your intentions are not that. So that's why when Fleabag addresses these things, it tells you that you know what, you are a flawed human being and you will remain a flawed human being till the end. It's just your intent and what you do with it, your actions. That's all that matters.
Absolutely.
That's
I mean, male or female, we are not checklist that it will be tick, tick, tick. Every aspect of this ism is there in me. We are people of, bone and flesh.
Yes, I mean, that's what I've been talking about, that it humanizes. Like, you have to accept yourself with your flaws. And irrespective of your gender, that has to come. I remember one beautiful sequence, and it starts very funnily, when Fleabag and her sister go to that women's retreat, and there is this men's retreat right next to them, and somebody shouts slut, like, hey, sluts, and this Fleabag says, yes, I just enjoy that aspect. So there is no qualms in her. She's very much okay with it. It's not that she's supporting it, but I will not take this seriously. And then
this is something that some of us do these days, that we accept these labels proudly, because if we as women are shamed for our sexuality, I'm a slut, I'm a hoe, we like to say that because you use it as abuses. So now fuck you, we'll just own it, and yes, this is who I am. What are you going to do about it? Yes. So I love that aspect also. So sorry, you were saying.
Yes, that is right. Yeah. So in that retreat, if you remember, there's this guy who actually didn't give her the loan. There was this incident. She took her top off in her office. She wanted to expand her business. And then both of these characters, which were wrong at certain point in time, connect. Over there, they share a cigarette. And when they go back, they meet again. This guy becomes the barista. He sanctions a loan. So it is not the enmity of a lifetime. Like, there were circumstances, and there is always a possibility to redeem yourself. Like Fleabag redeems herself, that person also redeems himself, and then it's nothing like they are great friends or anything, but things are okay. Yeah, her loan gets sanctioned, her cafe is working again. So that is one of the aspects which I really enjoy, the humanization, that you will not be enemy with today. If I have a fight with Arup or Pauroma, it's not like we will not talk for lifetime. It is not the end of it. There will be certain time when we'll come back, we will chat, and we will sort out our differences. So I think that is something which is very interestingly tackled in this through this sequence.
And like, if you actually do not talk to me after having a find, for whatever ideology you might seem to have, yourself endorsing to, that is no ism. That is only cynicism. No other ism can be equated to that. If you are doing something like that.
I want to go back to the character that Shubhadeep was talking about, that guy who's, I don't know if you know his name, I don't remember.
The banker.
The banker. These two characters, they are probably going through a similar kind of plane in their lives. And you'll see that both their issues have come out of sexual misconduct of some sort. His might be a bigger issue, that he has committed something that is close to a crime. But what she has done is she has been reckless and frivolous, and that's why it has resulted in a friend's death. So here we are looking at these two characters dealing with sex and its problems and the consequences of letting out in the form of sex. And here, the context of sex is not even romantic. It's a way both of them probably used it as a form of expression of aggression, or a way to let out frustration, or just to feel validated, as is in Fleabag's case, right? So, right. And that's why when they come together, they are accepting these things. And this is such a great thing about the show, that for the most part, they are telling you that sex is not about orgasms or about just feeling good about being intimate with someone. It's not always about that. So it has a very fine line with your emotional state and your aggressive nature and your way how frustrated you are. And when you deal with those issues, then sex becomes something else. Which is when she has sex with a hot priest and she turns the camera down. So yeah, I think that's a great way to show it.
Yeah, I think
That
that's
was very nicely said.
yeah, very interesting point of view actually. I wanted to now talk about that scene in the bar, if you remember, if you guys remember, like when she has to go back and retrieve that weird trophy which she gave them, a piece of art. And then she has this small chat with this elderly woman. I think her name is Christina Thomas.
Kirsten Scott Thomas.
Kirsten Scott Thomas. Yeah, she has this sequence where they interact and when they talk about so many things like falling in love, and they finally there's this kind of a monologue when she talks about menopause and how things change and how she's now and she should take things in the strides and do things and meet people and kiss people and things like that. What is your take on that particular scene, Paroma?
I think that was specially added for people like us who are this age, maybe who are close to Fleabag's age, and are actually asking questions like, what am I doing with my young life? Where am I going? Once I get old, what is going to happen? How much of my time have I wasted? What am I missing out on? So here they've brought in this wonderful character with a wonderful actor and had her explain these things to you, that it's not all bad and that this is not the end of life, you know. That right now, yes, there's so much sex you can have, there is so much scope for falling in love, but even as you age, there will be other things that you can be happy about. That at some point, maybe it's not important to be settled right now. You will settle by the time you reach the woman of the year age that she is at. You will have accomplished so much, and there's so much to look forward to in life.
What so I think that's is settled actually? Thing. I never got this concept of settled.
Indian concept.
What even it is it?
That's exactly, I think, what this sequence says. This woman, who is supposedly the woman of the year, she is not even bothered about what trophy she carries home. And when Fleabag says, I cannot have the woman of the year, she says, oh, I am exhausted. I do not even think about all those aspects. And then, the last dialogue, if I remember it correctly, Fleabag was like, I'm only 33. And she says, and what has Jesus done by 33? He has died. He died.
Yeah.
So again, suddenly in between that kind of a modern aspects of two women talking, one woman kind of guiding the other, they bring in God. So it's again, the atheism is countered. By the end of the series, the priest actually leaves her for God. And at the same point of time, there is this sex with a priest. There is this sex in a confession room. Sex or kind of physical intimacy in a confession room. So it's keeping on hitting on that same aspect that anything which is institutionalized does not have much of a meaning. Please get rid of these rules and these formalities and go by the spirit of everything, not by the words of things as we have in our minds.
Very well.
I also think that the confession room, when they start to make out and that photo falls, that painting or whatever is there, and he is immediately shaken and he's like, we can't do this. This is somewhere I feel that she is kind of trying to give up her destructive nature, which we have seen in the first season. And somewhere these things that keep coming between the relationship she shares with the priest is a way to challenge her again, that are you slipping back into that lifestyle? Are you just seducing him because you want power over God or a man of God? Or are you actually in love? It's just challenges. And maybe she is in love. I believe she is in love. But what is the cost of it, and is this what he wants? Are you misleading each other? What are you doing? So somewhere when these things keep happening, I think it's a way to make Fleabag question herself also.
Another aspect of it which I really enjoy, which I suppose you've not talked about, is that her playing dumb. So if you see, every time something is going to happen, she will look at the camera and tell this is going to happen, and that happens. So like when his boyfriend Harry is there, he will say, no, he will come back because he left the dinosaur. So he comes back again and takes the dinosaur. Second, we are going to have sex. And he looks at her, yes, we are going to have sex.
So, and he's like, stop doing that. Why are you looking away?
No, what I was telling is, I also came across this very interesting video in YouTube. I think it's in Insider YouTube channel, where they show that throughout the whole series, every shot in Fleabag kind of has 12 to 16 cuts. That's the way, that's the kind of portrayal of the nature of how Fleabag feels, Fleabag thinks. It's so short spanned, and that's the reason the cuts are so crisp and so short cuts. When she's falling in love with the priest, and there is this sequence of they going for shopping and then they're walking across the streets, the number of cuts come down significantly. So it's like in 1 minute sequence, the number of cuts is 3 to 4, as against 12 to 16 in the whole series. So it's like, it's more a soothing experience for Fleabag. It's more a calming experience, a more composed Fleabag that we see. And that's so brilliantly put across in the behind the camera, in the technical part of making of this series as well. I've not come across editing playing such a big part in a narrative of a content this brilliantly when I actually watched that video.
That makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, because you know what, I haven't seen this video that you're talking about, and I also didn't notice the change in the way the cuts are done. But now that Arup is saying this, I realize that I perceived the first season and the second season very differently, not just because of the shift in the tone, but now that I think about it, it's also the difference in the way the scenes play out and the edit. I thought there's something different about the shots. Maybe there's also something different about the shots, but the cuts are actually longer in the second season. So that makes a lot of sense. So that's when her mind is actually settled. And in the first season, she's all over the place, and the second season, she's actually settling down and chilling through life. So it makes a lot of sense. Thanks. I'll go check that out.
Please watch that video. That's a very beautiful video they created. Very interesting point they found out actually.
Yeah. Making editing editing and technicalities do play part in a particular series or in a movie, but it is so organic in this one that you will find that the style of editing changing as we come towards the season, specifically when she goes with the relationship with the priest, which is very interesting. Anyways, before we wrap it up, I have a hypothetical scenario, and for all of us. So Fleabag will not have any more seasons. We all know that, and this is the end of the season. But suppose, as directors, you have to make a season 3 of Fleabag. What would you do with that? What would be your? I don't want to go into a lot of details, but like if it has to have a season 3, and they're probably a grand culmination of in season 3, instead of 2, we are having 3 seasons. How would you perceive it? How would you visualize it if it has a 3rd season? Like for you, if you were making it.
I genuinely don't want to because I think some things are perfect where they are, and I am personally not someone who would go into like a fan fiction zone for something that is so well done. So if I'm a Twilight fan, then for Twilight I'll think of fan fiction, but this is not in that zone. This is something very precisely done, something so well made. And I also think it's a very personal journey for Phoebe Waller-Bridge, something that's come out of her head. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to affect that with my own story or judgment. I can tell you this much, that I have a lot of stories in my own head that are heavily inspired by watching her and realizing that I don't have to hide anything, that I can talk about everything that I want And that I would implement in my own stories. But I would not ever want a Fleabag season 3 if that is what she wants.
All right.
That's what I want to say. I'm sorry to disappoint.
No. Let me just reframe the question. We are not going to have us say, we are not talking about season 3 anymore. Now, what do you think? Now, just imagine the last scene of Fleabag, and she's like moving away and she's looking at the camera. She's looking at us who have been her accomplice for so long now. And now she goes away. The priest is gone. So what do you think is the mental state of Fleabag? What do you think? How does she cope with it? Do you think she's actually happy now? Do you think she has the will in her to get out of this heartbroken situation which happened with the priest and carry on with her life? Or she again goes down the rabbit hole? So what do you think happens? It's like anything you have in mind.
That's a good question. I can tell you this much, that when he says it'll pass, that is not something I believe. I don't think it'll pass ever. I think it'll stay on in the background for her for the rest of her life. She can move on, she can fall in love with other people, but this will stay with her. And I don't think she will slip again, because I think her character becomes a full circle. It comes a full circle at the end, and she's happy and content where she is, and she's content even though she's facing heartbreak. She can deal with it because she no longer hates herself. So I don't think she would slip into those tendencies again. She would just go on with life. She would be strong doing what she can do with her life, and in the background she would also always remember the priest, and the priest would always remember her.
Okay.
I actually echo Paroma on that. So I do not believe that Fleabag would become the same person as she was in season 1. She might have an affair. She might have, casual sex as well. But the priest stays with her. And that's the reason, because she has now got the priest, maybe not in flesh, but in memories or in emotion. That's the reason she gets this courage to leave back us, the audience, and go forward. Because she carries something as strong with her as we were, kind of fulfilling for her till now. Now she do not need her anymore. She has something stronger or something to cling to. She was always telling, I want someone to wake up me in the morning and tell me what to wear, something like that. So she has got something, if I would not say replacement, but something to cling to, something like that. So that's my feeling. Yeah. The other point you were mentioning, yes, I too do not want Fleabag coming back with a season 3. I would love to have a spin-off on Belinda. Her character and what happens, and kind of a season or maybe a couple of episodes on that particular character would be fine with me.
Which one?
Kirsten Scott Thomas's character,
okay.
Belinda.
Okay. Belinda, okay. He actually remembers the name, I didn't.
I actually watched pretty recently, so yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's great. Also, sorry guys, just one more thing. If you guys like Fleabag, I would highly recommend. I don't know, maybe you guys have watched it, but I May Destroy You is on Hotstar. Please watch that. Okay. While Fleabag was funny, I May Destroy You is very difficult to watch. It's very difficult to watch, but it's dealing in similar themes, and it also brings in race. So I would highly recommend it. Sorry,
I have not, so I will definitely watch that. Sure.
Thank you for that recommendation. So if I were supposed to end that Fleabag story, since none of you asked my take, but I'm going to give it anyways because I gave the question. So anyways, so for me, what's going to happen is, like, the priest is going away and the Fleabag is going in this direction, and then suddenly the priest is going to leave the town, so he's going to the metro railway station. Fleabag has an epiphany, and now she takes a taxi and goes towards the railway station. And then there is this shot of this metro where the priest is there with his hands out and Fleabag is running towards him. And then they catch each other's hand, and then they live happily ever after. So that is...
you want the Bollywood airport
Everyone
sequence,
wants that. No, he's right, Arup. That's what we all want. We just... know that it's not going to happen, but Shubhadeep is right. That is what we all want.
I actually remember this. I don't know whether I've seen that movie, Live in a Metro, there was this
Yes.
scene of Irfan Khan and Konkana, where
Yeah.
Irfan takes a horse and goes to the railway
He's like, but
station.
no, अब मैं शादी कर रहा हूँ. Why are you coming now?
अब
पहले
तो मैं
बोलना
शादी
चाहिए.
right,
Also,
right, right.
if you guys have watched Little Women, right, by Greta Gerwig. The
Yes.
Greta Gerwig version, you remember that she also runs to the train station and अरे जाओ जाओ उसको लेके आओ, and she actually goes and
Right, right, right.
all the time she's talking to the publisher and saying that okay fine we'll get her married, but actually that's not what happened is what is implied, right?
Right, right, right.
So again that Bollywood ending is something we all crave for, you know.
Yes.
It just never happens in real life.
No, I'm just
Right, that you mentioned, Little Woman. That's also such a beautiful one by Greta Gerwig.
Yeah.
The subversion, the ending, I loved it.
Yes, I think we are at the end of this discussion, and it was great talking to you, Poroma. A lot of perspectives which you brought into this discussion we didn't have, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule and doing this with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arup and Shubhoti. And thank you for all your wonderful insights and all the new things that you've given me to watch. I'll definitely go check those out. So thanks.
Thank you so much.